Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. This is Sandra, and today's video is going to be all about the pen testing career path. So when I was first getting started out in pen testing, I really didn't know what all the roles were. I just thought you join as a pen tester and then you're a pen tester for like 5, 10, 15 years. But there are more niche roles that you go into once you're a bit more senior, once you're in your mid-career. So in today's video, we're gonna go all the way from junior pen testers, source code analysis, ethical hacking, red team, etc. Alright, so let's say you're someone who just graduated college or graduated from a boot camp, and your first role is going to be something equivalent to junior pen testers. So as a junior pen tester, you're really not expected to know everything. Obviously, you might already have hours of hacking experience, but you may not have necessarily completed an official penetration test on a web application. So as a complete beginner, you're likely going to spend a lot of time learning the tools that your company actually uses. For example, if your company is really big on Burp Suite or maybe some vulnerability scanning tools, then you're likely going to gravitate to whatever your company is using at the time. And you likely will still start out testing your own assessments, but maybe you're paired up with a more senior member of the pen testing team, or you're going to start with the vulnerability scanning tools. And for those of you who may not be familiar, these are essentially tools that run scans on web applications and check for vulnerabilities. You don't necessarily have to be a pen tester to use these tools since they are pretty self-explanatory and they run automatically, but it is nice to have someone on the pen testing team run false positives or true positives on these. For example, if the vulnerability scanner tells me that a specific field on a website is vulnerable to SQL injection, then that is something that me as a junior pen tester would try to validate or test for in some way. And just doing this alone is really going to teach you a lot because as an ethical hacker, you're not necessarily replacing vulnerability scanners, but you really do work hand in hand. And you usually want an actual person to do the checking and validation of certain vulnerabilities, because vulnerability scanners can spit out hundreds of vulnerabilities on one application. And you just want to make sure that they're ones that your company actually cares about, because there might be vulnerabilities that are in there, but they're very low priority and they just may not be worth your company's time or the app team's time to try to solve every single tiny bug. So you want to hit the high risk ones first, and then eventually, if there's time, you can add those lower risk ones into the app team's backlog. Which is why as a junior pen tester, it's really important to learn all these things and be able to validate findings, and also learn how to communicate well with your stakeholders, as well as write detailed, cohesive reports so they can repeat whatever issues or vulnerabilities that you found in a step-by-step process, so then they can actually test that it's been completed and then pass it back to you to verify that the vulnerability was fixed. Now, of course, that process is also going to follow you through more senior level pen testing roles that other people can replicate those vulnerabilities and then go on to try to fix them. But there may just be a big emphasis on that while you're just starting out, so you can get a good feel for what works for you. Another thing you may be doing in a more junior pen testing role is that your company might have some custom scripts that they want to run on every application that they test. Maybe they have different ones for certain types of applications, and you may just be running those scripts on those web applications. And in the beginning, it probably might feel a little bit script kiddie-ish because you're really just taking someone else's script that maybe a more senior level person wrote on the team, and you're just executing them, and maybe you're not thinking much of it. But what's really important there is that eventually, once you start running these scripts and understanding what they do and what they look for in terms of vulnerabilities, you could also start looking at the code, because I also think that one thing that sets apart more junior level versus senior level pen testers is their ability to look at code and understand it. You don't necessarily have to know how to write the code unless you want to create your own payloads and go into scripting and stuff. But just understanding what code looks like and what it's doing, that's really important in itself. You may also be spending some time keeping up with cybersecurity news, which is always really important because you want to make sure they are staying on top of the new vulnerabilities or 0 days that are going to be headliners that might potentially affect your company or the technologies that you use. And in my video that I previously shared about free cybersecurity resources, I did also share some resources on how I have a RSS feed for cybersecurity news. So I would definitely recommend checking out that video, as well as creating your own RSS feed for cyber news and attacks. And then going back to the development slash mentoring side, there likely will be a senior penetration tester on the team that is really helping you guide through the ropes. So while you're learning new tools like Burp Suite, Wireshark, or Nmap, this senior level penetration tester is really going to be the person who's helping you and kind of guiding you towards what you should be learning. And for me, as someone who was first starting out in pen testing on my previous team, I had about 2 or 3 mentors that I was meeting up with on a bi-weekly or tri-weekly basis. And even though what I was doing wasn't necessarily the same as what they were doing, I actually had set up shadowing calls with them. So whatever they're working on at the time, they would just share their screens and kind of show me their thought process of the things that they're working on. And obviously it's a lot more advanced than what I'm doing. And I think that's something that's really beneficial to understand what more senior people are thinking while they are trying to perform these penetration tests. And of course, you can also walk through actual examples. For example, on Integrity, which is a bug bounty website, they have these monthly challenges that they put out, and they are based on actual vulnerabilities that someone has found on their bug bounty platform. So it's really interesting, the different ways and lengths that people go through to find these vulnerabilities, because I think that is a lot more red team focused. And this is kind of going into that more mid-level penetration testing role where you're able to understand what your mentor is doing and understanding the tools that they're using. And then let's say as a mid-level penetration tester, maybe you're spending more time on capture the flag challenges, doing these bug bounty challenges on Integrity that have a lot more steps than just what you were doing as a junior pen tester, because it may take 2, 3, 4 steps just to exploit a vulnerability on a web page. And it's really not as simple and direct as you might think in compared to the movies where they're trying to hack into a website and then they're like doing some stuff and then there's like, I'm in. You know, it's not like that. There's various steps, hours and hours that get put into hacking into a website, especially the ones on bug bounty pages that have thousands of ethical hackers trying to hack into it to get a bug bounty. Some of the certifications that might help you get from a more entry-level role to a more mid-level role are really the CEH, or the Certified Ethical Hacking Certification, or the Pentest Plus that I've been actually hearing a bit more about. I know the CEH is definitely a lot more popular than the Pentest Plus, but I do think that CompTIA has very good entry-level certifications that companies might look for in a candidate, especially for entry-level, or maybe you have 0 to 2 years of experience. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. If you're someone who is already more mid-level in your career, then the CEH is definitely a better option for you. Alright, so let's say you had a few years of pen testing experience already, and now you want to go into something else that is still pen testing related, but not specifically pen testing. I do think that there's a very distinct pivot if you're someone who has pen testing background but don't want to go into red team, or maybe you want to try something a bit more in the weeds technical in terms of coding, and that is more of a source code analysis / malware reverse engineering kind of role. So in a role like this, you would be a lot more focused on what the actual code looks like. So there's vulnerability scanners that scan applications for vulnerabilities, but there's also code scanners that scan code for vulnerabilities. There may be some overlap, but essentially they're 2 separate things in terms of keeping your application secure. So if you're someone who maybe came from a development background, or maybe you just want to go into development at some point and want to get more hands-on with coding, then this may be a better route for you. You may still be doing similar things to what you were doing with a vulnerability scanner, and once the code scanner spits out a whole bunch of vulnerabilities that they found in the code, or code smells, or any other bad thing that a code scanner is looking for, then you would go on to verify whether it's a true positive or a false positive, and then you would pass that back to the team in some kind of report format for them to then go in and fix. So they really kind of work hand in hand, and you definitely have to be a bit more technical in this kind of role because you have to understand what code is doing and know what code looks like. And if you know that you want to go into source code analysis or anything more related into the deep in the weeds code or lower level things that go into a web application, then we'll definitely try to learn some coding languages, specifically Java, Python, maybe C, C++, and C#, since they are probably the more popular coding languages in terms of backend, and it will really help you to know the syntax of those languages. But of course, Java, C# are very similar in terms of syntax, so you're really killing 2 birds with 1 stone there. So if you're interested in something like this, I would probably start out with Java, just because it's a very popular backend language. And now moving forward to a more advanced pen testing role, which could be ethical hacking or red teaming. Honestly, it really depends on what your company structure is looking like or whatever roles that you're applying to, because there may be some companies that just have one penetration testing team and they just work together on a bunch of different things, and whoever might be more senior that might take the harder applications or the bigger applications, and then the junior people might run their vulnerability scanners and do their things or do testing on the more user-based side. So it really depends. But in a bigger organization, those may be split up into different teams. That's why it really depends on the size of your company and how big their cybersecurity team is. But with that in mind, let's say an ethical hacking role is not the same as a red teamer role in this case. In a role like this, you're obviously expected to know everything that the junior level or more mid-level pen testers might know, but you also may be the ones who are creating those custom scripts or payloads to help your company better test your applications. For example, let's say your company has been using a vulnerability scanner, but what if that vulnerability scanner isn't enough to test for what your company needs to test for? For example, if your company is one that makes chatbots, basically they make chatbots for other companies to implement into their websites, but with a normal vulnerability scanner, if you're testing a chatbot on a website, it may not do what you expect it to do. For example, it's not going to know that it's a chatbot, and it's only going to test a certain amount of inputs or a certain type of input that may not be as unique compared to when a human does it. So let's say for your company, you might write some custom scripts or executables that would test the chatbot in a way that is more beneficial for your company because it's actually looking for the vulnerabilities that you might expect it to have, or ones that the typical vulnerability scanner won't be able to find. So I do think that coding skills are going to help you a lot here, especially for creating your own payloads and scripts. And in a role like this, it would really be helpful if you knew the popular scripting languages like JavaScript, Python, and TypeScript. JavaScript is just really easy to just type into your browser. Like if you're using Google Chrome, then the developer tools window, it's really easy for you to just type JavaScript in there. And then Python scripting is very lightweight. It's a simpler language to learn and is really good for lightweight scripting. And I actually think it looks more aesthetically easy to learn than JavaScript, although I've never taken a formal class on JavaScript. But in my current role, I do a lot of Python scripting, and this is the first role I've done any Python scripting, and it's really convenient how easy it is to just write a Python script, have it run. Obviously, it still needs to be lightweight because Python isn't the most efficient coding language, but it is good for just small scripts and different tests that you might be writing. You might also be coming up with different vulnerabilities that your team wants to test for. For example, if there's a new feature that your company came up with on some tool that they have, on some application that they have, you'll probably be coming up with the custom plan to go in and find certain vulnerabilities, or maybe some vulnerabilities that you would expect to see. And of course, being a mentor to the more junior level pen testers in your organization. All right, lastly, let's go into red teamers. So red teamers are really the cream of the crop. They're essentially the best ethical hackers that your company may have, and they're highly skilled and also maybe highly niche. The goal of the red team is to make sure that your company has the best defenses in place to protect it from zero-day attacks, to protect it from vulnerabilities and external hackers that may be trying to get into your company. One thing that really sets the red team apart from other ethical hacking teams in your company is that they really want to mimic an actual threat. For example, some companies may also hire an external red team. They could be black box, white box, which basically determines how much information that the red team has on whatever it is they're trying to hack into. And their goal is to identify and also exploit the vulnerabilities that you have in your systems. Obviously in a non-malicious way, but still in a way that actual external threats may use to try to get into your company's systems. And another thing that sets the red team apart from ethical hacking teams is that they don't have to just be web focused. They could be hacking into servers, applications. Physical security is a big one. I'm sure you guys have heard stories about someone saying they're from the IT team and they're coming in to fix some issue, and then they get let into the building, no questions asked. So red team can also work on physical infiltration just to prove that someone externally can get into your company without needing to have a badge or a certain form of identification. The key here is that red team really just looks for the weakest link. For example, your company might have very secure applications, but let's say there's just one application that is a bit older. Maybe it's no longer being used, but maybe it's still being hosted and maybe external users can still get to it. Let's say some malicious person is able to create an account on here, and because it's so low quality and and rarely maintained by your actual company. It just takes that one vulnerable application to get into your system, potentially infect machines, take control of other user accounts. And that's why you want to be as well-rounded as possible as a company, because all it takes is your weakest link and a hacker can gain so much from just that. Which is why you always want your red team to be testing a whole bunch of different things, whereas the pen testing team might have scheduled vulnerability or penetration testing assessments throughout the year. Let's say the penetration testing team gets a few penetration testing projects a month. Usually the teams in your company are aware that those are happening, but maybe on the red team, the team may not be as aware that they are trying to hack into their system, since they really want to simulate a real-world example of what the system or the blue team might do to defend itself against a real-world attack. So as a red team, you're basically just trying to find any way into an application, a server, a system, and exploit that to the point that other adversaries might also want to. A key thing here, obviously, for red team is that you want to know what your adversaries are looking for. For example, if you're in the government space, then maybe your red team is really trying to simulate what a nation state would do compared to a script kiddie. Because if you're a government agency, it's very likely that nation states already have their eyes on you and are trying to hack into your systems. Let me know if it would be helpful for you guys if I made a video on the types of attackers or adversaries in cybersecurity, like script kiddies, hacktivists, organized crime, nation states, etc. And one certification I think would be good for ethical hackers or red teamers is the OSCP, or the Offensive Security Certified Professional certification. This one is definitely very popular. You basically have to hack into, I believe, 5 different machines within a 24-hour window, and they all take different types of exploits. So it's definitely a very intensive, time-consuming certification, and there's a lot of prep that goes into it as well. And I believe it's also a pretty expensive certification, so you just want to make sure you do your due diligence and do some research on it. But I do also think most employers would be willing to pay for your OSCP certification, especially the training that comes with it, because they have this site where you can go on, basically train and try to hack into a whole bunch of different boxes. And there's also like a forum where other people can post different hints or how they got into it. So it's a really helpful resource for someone who is studying for the OSCP. And obviously it makes you a even more competitive pen tester, especially for more senior level roles. Alright, so that's it for this video. I hope you guys found it helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions. This actual career path was one that I really considered for myself when I was kind of looking for options of where to take my role, and I still think it could be something I might want to go into down the line. But at least for right now in my early career, I really do want to try a bunch of different roles, which is why I'm really just keeping the door open for opportunities, especially ones that I don't know exist or haven't been exposed to yet. So if you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe and turn on post notifications. I post videos every Wednesday and Sundays at 12 p.m. It used to be 2 p.m. on Wednesdays, but I've changed it to 12 p.m. on Wednesdays and Sundays. And if there's any video topics that you guys would like to see from me, let me know in the comments below and I will add them into my backlog. Alright, thank you guys again for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!